Man, I am really humbled and excited to bring you this video today. If you look back at the mouse market over the past year or two, I think a lot of us have been wondering, where is Zowie? Why aren't they responding to market trends? Where are the refinements to their lineup? Where is any new mouse? Well, I recently got my answer. Turns out the core team that made all the magic with Zowie mice left and started their own thing, a company called VAXEE. And in conjunction with the company called ZYGEN, they've developed their first mouse called the NP-01. This is a direct spiritual successor to the Zowie mouse lineage, so you will see some familiarities there. And if there's companies out there who have been skating by with questionable quality control or inconsistencies in their design, careful boys, daddy's home. This is a mouse for people that demand a lot out of their mouse, and we're gonna get into it. You ready? Let's go! Yo, I'm Brian P. You're watching BadSeed Tech, and today we're checking out the NP-01 gaming mouse from ZYGEN, powered by VAXEE. This is an early sample, so two things straight off the rip. This colorway is not final, nor is the texture or the coating of the top shell. I would expect all black, and the texture I'll explain in detail here in a bit. The biggest thing you need to know is that VAXEE, the former core team from Zowie, helped to develop this mouse for and taking input from ZYGEN, a company owned by Japanese Counter-Strike legend Noppo. This mouse is not about flash, it's not about control software, it's not about RGB. This is a stunningly well-built performance FPS mouse, and honestly the most polished pre-release prototype sample I've received in the history of the channel. They're not telling me the price yet, but I get the impression it's going to be community friendly because these are not suits, they're not money guys. These are mouse guys, real gamers, and it shows. Out of all the Zowie shapes and sizes, it has the most in common with the S2, but there's a big important difference here. See, this isn't a symmetrical mouse, and it's not really an ergo mouse. The shape of the bottom plate looks ergo, with the outside curve and this little bump on the thumb side, but the top shell doesn't have a big side-to-side fall off. It's largely horizontal across the top shell. It's weird, but good weird. The front of the mouse feels like a symmetrical mouse, but the outside hump positions my pinky in such a way that the mouse remains straight in line with my wrist. On a smaller frame symmetrical, I have a tendency to settle into a grip that looks like this. My hand measurements are 20.5 by 10.5 centimeters, and I prefer the S1 over the S2 in terms of size. But due to the way I hold this mouse, it feels in hand like a size somewhere in between the two. It's a relaxed claw for me, but I can still fingertip by moving my pinky further forward on the frame. A lot of you will be able to palm this as well. Notice how the side buttons are still positioned where I need them to be, regardless of grip style. Colorway aside, you're probably getting some IntelliMouse 1.1 vibes. I can't speak to it. I've honestly never owned one, but I understand it was a very popular mouse in simpler times, and I know it was at least some point of inspiration for this mouse. Dimensions here are 120 millimeters long, 58 millimeters at the front flare, 66 at the rear, with a grip width of 59 millimeters. Height is 39 millimeters, and the curve of the top shell front to back is very similar to that S2 as well. Stated weight on this is 75 grams. My copy weighs more like 78, 79 grams on my scale. Overall build quality is very solid, as you'd expect. The tolerances on the tooling are insanely polished. You'd be forgiven for thinking this top shell is a single piece, but you can actually see the line if you look hard enough where the side panel joins the top shell. You can see it, but you cannot feel it. Front triggers are split from the body. This copy does have comfort grooves here. I know the exact specs of these are still being worked on to perfect these. You'll also notice that the frame hugs the sides of the trigger. Pre and post travel, non-existent, not even a factor. This thing is dialed in. You can get some side play if you physically manipulate the triggers, but in normal case use, you won't feel anything. The only thing to be conscious of here is that you really need to strike the trigger where the groove directs you to. If you click too far to the outside of the triggers, you will get a little rock side to side, like they don't feel 100% stable. But again, it's important to differentiate what I can demonstrate intentionally in a review versus what you're going to experience in-game. Huano 60-gram switches all over this guy. Fast, crispy, always been a fan of the click feel on these. The scroll wheel is classic Zowie, but somehow more of the things that I've criticized in the past. This thing is tactile AF. Feels like it, sounds like it. This is not a daily driver productivity scroll wheel. This is by design for people who use their scroll in-game. Couple important notes here, it's 24 steps now, and it's optical. Some people may prefer a mechanical scroll wheel, but the idea here is longevity. Side buttons are smaller than what we'd see on a Zowie mouse, but as I showed earlier, positioned very well. Again, pre and post travel, nothing. These are spot on when pushed directly in. I can wobble these side to side when I purposely try to, but in game, they feel dumb solid. The texture of this plastic on the top shell is super slippery. This is maybe the first mouse I've ever used where I can actually feel my hands get more slippery and sweaty as I play, and I generally don't sweat from my hands, like hardly ever. It's a relief that they'll be using something closer to the material they used on the bottom plate. And speaking of that bottom plate, we've got a lot going on there. Sensor is the 3389, generous glides front and back. My only knock on these being that they are very thin. I know they'll eventually offer these in 2 different thicknesses because you have the ability to adjust liftoff distance on the hardware. In addition to that, you also have 3 other adjustments under the mouse: DPI in 400, 800, 1600, and 3200. You also have polling rate adjust at 125, 500, and 1000, and what may be the killer feature, click response time. You get 2, 4, and 8. Like with discussions about debounce time, when this gets too low, you risk a double click, but different people's internal rhythm and motor memory operates differently. You're probably most used to the 8 setting without knowing it. In practice, it was interesting because I just played a couple rounds in Kovacs with each setting to kind of get an average, and I performed better naturally at 4 milliseconds than the other 2 settings. It's marginal, but it was consistent. I find it hard to have the human ability to test some of the claims companies make in terms of click response and latency, namely something like the XM1 sub 1 millisecond delay time we looked at recently. I can't, but at least 2 of the people involved with this mouse are former CSGO pros, where I'm only a slightly above average player, so a more skilled aimer will be able to speak to this. I definitely found it interesting though that I played consistently better with one of the 3 available settings. One of the biggest takeaways then is that there is no software, there's no drivers, there's no ecosystem you have to buy into. The biggest advantage here obviously is that you can take this mouse anywhere with your settings intact, plug it in, and be totally good to go. The only drawback here is if you're a person that uses macros or uses rebindings outside of like an in-game level, this won't be for you. As for the cable, we've got a paracord-like flex cable here. It's not the softest or the most flexible I've found, but I much prefer it over a rubber cable. The stress relief has been specifically molded to have the most aggro incline I've seen exiting a mouse frame. It really does hold like the whole first 6 inches of the cable off the desk mat. It's like having a bungee built right into the front of the mouse. So in terms of overall use and performance, it's a great natural fit for me. After the copy culture cycle of the past year in the mouse space, it honestly takes me a lot to get excited about a new mouse. I've been very lucky that I've had a few bangers on the desk over the past couple weeks. Still have a big lightweight with an all new sensor to show you guys very soon. It's been making it really tough to stick with a main right now. I think the weight here between that 70 and 80 grams really hits the sweet spot of performance and stability, though I usually err on the side of wanting a lighter mouse, but the design here is undeniable. The front to rear balance on a mouse isn't even something I usually speak on, but this mouse feels perfectly balanced. That's one of 2 words that kept coming up for me while testing this. 2 words: balance and quality. I can't stress enough that not only is the NP-01 very well thought out, but it's executed exceptionally well. And I'm talking about a pre-release prototype. That's virtually unheard of in this space. For the first time ever, I don't have to say, well, it's this, but I hope they fix ... in the final. Mechanically and structurally, this is good enough to be the final. I am happy that they're rethinking the plastic and the coating. I'm certain that whatever they land on for the comfort grooves will likely be even better than what I see here. The scroll wheel just is what it is. It's obnoxious for day-to-day use, but that's not the intent. This is a gamer's gaming mouse, a mouse nerd's mouse. Get excited. Stay tuned to all my social feeds for final pricing, release date, and availability. I will also link the socials for ZYGEN and VAXEE down below so you can follow along for yourself. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and until next time, stay up.